Sağ rezervi var. Lazım olsa.
5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Siz Azərbaycanlısınız?
Hə.
Sən aşkıl ol, mən deyəcəm.
4, 5, baş 6. 5, 6, baş 6, 7, 8. Uşaqlıydıq belə şeyləri oxuyardıq.
Rəngiz, 9 dan, qırmızı dan.
11, 12.
Maksim Gorki.
Bu dediniz dünən gətirmişsiniz da siz bura.
Hə, gecə gətirdim. Sən xiyalın rahat olsun. Raufla gəl.
1, 2, 3. Hansı bölgədənsiz?
Can.
Azərbaycanın hansı bölgəsində?
Gətirirsiniz gülləri.
Davay, danışıram. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hə, bu çoxdur. Azalt. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2,
Əxtiyar eşidirsən də mən? Səs yerindədir, yəni problem yoxdur hələ ki. Sən opşuda yoxlayaq bir-bir kolonkaları yenə. Sən yuxarıdan danış, bir-bir yoxlayaq. Ehtiyac var.
Ehtiyac var, ümumi danışmaq lazımdır, kolonkaları dinləmək lazımdır.
Yoxlayaq onda. İstənsən bir-bir dinə, hansı lazımsa yoxlayaq.
Mən yox, zaldan danışım ki,
Zaldan danışanda şeydə valına ver.
başa düşürəm, hangi kolonkaları yoxlamaq lazımdır. Gedir, getmir.
Bildim, sən danış, mən sənə çevrəlimdə deyim burada. Yoxladığımız kimi. Ya da istəyirsən gedim SM58-i götürüm, onunla yoxlayayım.
SM58 lazımdır hələ ki.
1, 2, 3, 4 rəsas. Bir, iki, üç, dört. Bir, iki, üç, dört.
Azerbaijan
Bir.
futbolu
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yavaş yavaş çık. Bir tane kalıp gel o yapalım.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Tamam, ayranda kesilip bir dakika.
Ses sound check.
Sok.
Bir, iki, üç, dört, beş. Rüstem, eşidirsən beni? Eşidirsənsə məni bu qaydada qalsın. Heç nə durma, yaxşı.
Gözlə Oruç, gözlə.
Mən sən deyəndə bir də sistemi söndürərsən, mikrofonla taxacağım.
Onlardan gəlir Oruç.
Bir nauşnikdən narahat olma. Mən
Olan hamısını azaltma.
əl nauşniki əlindədir, ona görə. Narahat olma.
Oruç, salda səs necədir Oruç?
Yoxladım, dedi mənə, yox, içim mən soruşum.
Oruç,
Bəli, bəli.
səs necədir?
Səs yaxşı zaldır hələ ki. Əgər gedişatda zəif olsa, mən sən zaldan deyəcəm, yaxşı?
Sən fikir ver danışanlar qalın.
Belə normal danışıram 20 santım. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2. Çox danışa bilmirəm çünki adam çox.
Bu bayaqki Libiyadır Bəxtiyar.
Ses. Bir. Ses kontrol. Ses kontrol. Bir, iki, üç, dört. Balkonun arxası. Ən alt.
Rüstem, sistemi söndürün. Sistemi söndür.
Dinara, çıktım.
Bəxtiyar yoxlayaq. 1, 2, super. Hər küncdən bir dənə yoxlayırıq Bəxtiyar.
Mənə də yoxlayın görün.
Mirvahid, naushniklər çatışmır 2 dənə masada.
Bəxtiyar əsas 1 2 3 4.
Danış əsasa.
Mirvahid, məni eşidirsənsə, naushniklər çatışmır.
1, 2.
1 2
Se declara abierta esta 18 cumbre.
We declare this 18th summit of the movement of non-aligned states officially open. Good day to you all. Good day to the heads of state, heads of government, heads of delegations, His Excellency President Ilham Aliyev. So before pressing on with today's agenda, I propose that we first hold a minute of silence. A minute of silence to honour the memory of those leaders of our non-aligned movement, the NAM, who have passed away since we last held our last summit in 2016 on our Isla Margarita, Venezuela's Margarita Island, until now. So we're referring to specifically Their Excellencies Mr. Mohamed Behi Kaid Essawi, ex-President of the Republic of Tunisia, His Excellency Robert Mugabe, ex-President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, His Excellency Mr. Bachuruddin Yusuf Habibie, ex-President of the Republic of Indonesia, Her Excellency Mrs. Shuma Swaraj, ex-Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of India. So, in name of all of the aforementioned former leaders, we're going to now commence a minute of silence.
Ha finalizado el minuto de silencio.
The minute of silence has now come to an end. That minute of silence, as we mentioned before, in memory of the fallen leaders, the leaders that have passed away since our last summit. And so now, in the name of the member states of our movement, and as well as special guests and my country as well, we would like to express our profound gratitude to the people and the government of the Republic of Azerbaijan for their hospitality and generosity throughout our stay. It's an honor. It's an honor to participate in this summit in the name of our respective countries in this 18th Summit of Heads of States and Government of the Non-Aligned Movement that has taken us to this beautiful city of Baku in the Republic of Azerbaijan. This is a country that we've got very strong bonds of friendship with already, and the people and government of which we will be eternally grateful to for their excellent hospitality and kindness to all of our respective delegations since the moment we arrived at this generous land. So for some years now, since we held our successful summit on Margarita Island in Venezuela, our country took up the presidency of the non-aligned states movement. And so that was the triennial 2016-2019, a very difficult, turbulent period that was marked by uncertainty and the presence of many challenges and the policies that have been applied by some powers who seek or pretend under the guise of multilateralism to undermine the authority and the right to self-determination of states and to undermine human rights, development, in our respective countries. In our country, Venezuela, which is an example, a clear example of how aggressive and harmful the international law can actually be when it's actually intervened upon by hegemonic states under unilateral systems who impose economic and social blockades and try to undermine us with armed interventions and try to bring us to our knees. But it's also our people. It's our Venezuelan people, a small Pacific people that from whose land 200 years ago a handful of men arrived at, led by our great leader, Simón Bolívar. They left from there to liberate the rest of Latin America. And we are a live example of resistance and unbreakable commitments to a peaceful future. And so with humility, we tell you all, we have faced the most barbarous imperialism that we've ever had to face, and with our sovereignty intact and our will to continue to be free and independent now and always. And down to that, or due to that, the massive importance that our country places on this movement and on the principles of Bandung, that is a real geographical and historical effort between different peoples of the world, and as well as regards the rehabilitation or the recovery of what is now the largest multilateral force in the world after the UN. That's to say, our movement, our non-aligned movement, that we have been daring and bold enough until today to have undertaken the presidency of for the last triennial. And so our summit of the non-aligned states 3 years ago on the island of Margarita in September 2016 was a place where we set out 3 concrete objectives, and we're going to now pay homage to those concrete measures and concrete goals here in this honourable city of Baku. We want to create more cohesion amongst member states, bringing diversity and cohesion in diversity. Number 2, we want to strengthen solidarity between the member states of the movement, and we want to better the non-aligned spirit. And thirdly, we want to carry on along that process of revitalisation of the NAM movement with the goal of basically reaffirming its full validity and relevance in today's international arena. And so I can now say here before you with great satisfaction that we have fulfilled all of those objectives. And we are now going to hand over to the Republic of Azerbaijan a NAM that is strengthened, it is stronger, and that in spite of its diversity has known how to show solidarity and take up common positions, underlining that way its relevance for those who try to minimise its scale. And the key to all of this is, brothers and sisters, in our mutual respect for each other and to always opt for solidarity consensus, because that's what enables us to better our solidarity amongst ourselves as members. And this is what eases the implementation of the decisions that we take and consolidates the credibility of our movement. And it's because of this, ladies and gentlemen, that we've been able to participate, and we can say this now in these terms, in more than 200 meetings of very intense multilateral work on different levels, so as to be able to formulate the position of the movement on topics that range from nuclear disarmament, coercive and unilateral measures, human rights, sustainable development, a culture of peace, and the issues of Palestine and Puerto Rico, peacekeeping operations, up to even the International Day of Multilateralism and diplomacy for peace, all established by the UN Assembly almost a year ago under the initiative of our movement. So we can be proud of that. And one of the main expressions of our movement and leading principles of expression of peace and friendliness amongst states is something that we use to reinforce our unbreakable solidarity with the heroic states of Palestine and Puerto Rico, as well as our brothers and sisters from the Democratic Republic of Korea, Cuba, Nicaragua, Syria, Zimbabwe, who, the same as Venezuela is going through right now, are dealing with the effects of unfair coercive measures that are unilateral in nature. And so we can also express our full solidarity to the Bolivian people, and specifically to our brother, the President Evo Morales Ayma, who, in spite of having been re-elected with an ample constitutional majority a few days ago so as to commence his next term in government, today is facing a destabilisation campaign. He's today, as things stand, having to face up to an attempted coup d'etat from external forces that try to deny the Bolivian voters and Bolivian people their democratic rights. So we know that the same practices were attempted on Venezuela at the start of this year, but we brought them down in peace and with a firm and constant satisfaction that we knew who we are. And so we tell Evo Morales, a coup d'etat is an attempt to weaken the free and democratic rights. And so we have to recognize the legitimacy of Evo Morales Ayma's victory in Bolivia in the face of the colonial forces that try to undermine him and the people, all of the millions of people that turned up at the urns, and from the point of the Constitution were exerting their rights last Sunday on the 20th of October. And we've said it, and we'll say it again here in this tribune. The new modalities of international warfare are referring to threats and aggressions that are economic now in nature and that are just as deadly and threatening as force against population, especially for the weakest of our people, our women, our children, our boys and girls, our older people. These economic wars that are promoted by imperial forces against our people in all of their different variant forms. On the one hand, the imposition of neoliberal, brutal regimes and sanctions, and we can see that these are then imposed by the International Monetary Fund, and there's raises in public expenses, and healthcare's cut, funds that are used for healthcare. We're talking about a violation of the sovereignty of our peoples and human rights, and it's because of that that we would like to denounce all of these impositions of economic and social sanctions that have had such a devastating effect that they can be compared to military action. And today, right now, the financial and economic aggressions perpetrated by some of these world powers are just as deadly as their troops. On the other hand, dear brothers and sisters, I'd like to say that when countries such as Venezuela and so many others, I might say, that share this tribune that's multipolar, multicentric, of the new world that is the movement of the non-aligned states, we prefer to attend to the needs of our states, and we have to defend ourselves from these hegemonic powers. And when the people's will is ignored and this is all imposed on us, I'm now going to quote Vicente Pedrobo, a Chilean poet. When we try to when governments put their emphasis on the human being, on the man, and these decadent imperialistic states that carry out these atrocities and these aggressions against our state, when they do that, Venezuela focuses on the human being, on the man. As that poet says, we resist, and we will continue to resist in this way. And we are not just resisting, we are winning. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are winning this economic, multifaceted warfare that's been engaged upon, and we are going to grow in prosperity. And we would like to express from our souls as free men our sincere gratitude to all of our brothers and sisters of the NAM movement for their trust, that they have placed in us, and also their unwavering support and solidarity to Venezuela in the exercise of our presidency, as well as the cooperative spirit that they've showed us in the past 3 years, in which we've had the great honour to preside over the NAM. Dear brothers and sisters, we live in a world that's faced with multiple and complex threats and challenges to world peace and security. And these should all be dealt with in a coordinated manner as responsible members of the international community that we are, through multilateralism and according to the structures of the UN Charter. And we cannot be indifferent to the spikes of armed conflicts that are getting more and more severe, and the lack of solutions to long-running conflicts, as well as the extension of colonial-type situations and the imposition of foreign powers in different countries in the world. And so we have to fight against this with our diplomacy of peace, multilateralism, which are our only weapons to fight against these acts of oppression. We live, and we are going through a historic moment in time in which multilateralism and the multilateral system as a whole is going through a complex crisis. We're going through a systemic crisis, a systemic phenomenon that affects a substantial number of countries, specifically those that are developing countries. And in the very same way that international relations are played out today, and that these are manifest in multiple forms in military interventions and forced regime change, coup d'etat, media campaigns that aim to manipulate and misinform, as well as undercover operations, all of which are aimed at destabilizing economically, socially and politically our member countries. Our member countries of this NAM movement. And our motivations, or the motivations of these forces, go from geopolitical dominance. They want to monopolize all the natural resources, and they want to manipulate social and cultural traditions against all principles of international relations. And therefore, we ask ourselves, how can it be that the object of aggressions, we are the object of their aggressions, these multilateral powers, or we're talking about 3/4 of the UN that we represent here, and we represent 55% of the planet in a territory where we actually represent 1/3 of the world's surface area. We're talking about the home of 80% of gas and oil. We're here together, those countries. We are this movement. And in terms of our population and geopolitical power, how can we be subject to these aggressions? In terms of our energetic power as well, this is our significance for the movement as a NAM movement. And so other natural resources and rich biodiversity that our countries also contain only add to this further. And we've also got a multi-regional setup in our movement, and this makes us, even more than a movement, a very, very pertinent and relevant actor in world relationships, and we should be conscious of that. We should know that our NAM movement, with our great traditions and spirit of fighting spirit, continues to be absolutely necessary for the democratization of this world, of this planet, so that we can rid ourselves of, once and for all, whoever decides to take up the self-entitled role of policing the world and wanting to set up unidimensional world. We want to have a multi-world very diverse and, of course, most importantly, free of any hegemonic pretenses or efforts. And so we've been able to balance out these colonialistic and imperialist forces in the world to date. We know that that was the very supposition and very principle of our being set up. And we know that between the 50s, 60s and 70s, all of this was going on. There was poverty, oppression that had gone on for centuries. And quite frankly, we are those who have inherited Balmasar, Nkrumah, Nehru, Sukarno, Fidel Castro Ruz and Joseph Tito's legacies. These are all universal figures and pioneers of freedom of their people and for bringing forth the efforts of the greatest causes of humanity, bringing them to the forefront. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, we ask ourselves, how can we come up with concerted responses to face up to flagrant violations of the UN Charter of Human Rights and international law, including aggressions, crimes of aggression, economic and developmental warfare, and multilateral forces that are used as blackmail against our countries so as to try and punish us and affecting more than a third of our population and their well-being, and more than 30 million Venezuelans, as has been affirmed by the UN rapporteur in this subject area themselves. So we ask ourselves, how are we going to guarantee these effective, concerted and concrete responses in the face of the phenomenon of climate change that represents a direct threat to the survival of our humanity, especially for those small developing insular states. And we're talking about our Caribbean brothers, our Pacific brothers, or the scourge of international terrorism, or the growing spend on military troops, but not on development. So we keep asking ourselves the same questions. How can we guarantee efficient responses that are concrete and consensual against the spread of racism, discrimination, xenophobia, intolerance, or up against the politicization or double standarding when we talk about applying human rights and the lack of transparency. And on this last point, I will leave it up to you guys to continue. And I would like to thank you from the bottom of my soul, on the part of Venezuela, for your confidence vote in us and for having put us forward as candidates to the Human Rights Council and supported our candidature. Thank you so, so much for supporting Venezuela in the face of so much infamous rumours and false news. So in the face of so much blackmail, imperialistic blackmail, in the face of the rest of the world, you can remain absolutely 100% sure that we're going to assume this role with 100% responsibility and commitment, this role that you've given us as part of the UN General Assembly. And you have placed in us, from this tribune and from our mother organisation, a responsibility to defend the countries of the Global South. And that's what we will do again in the Human Rights Council at the UN. So dear brothers and sisters, citizens of the world, from Venezuela, we tell you this: the response to all of our questions and the response to all of our doubts is to be found in the full observance and full respect of the UN Charter and the Bandung Principles. That's the north on our compass. That's what we should use to guide us so that we continue to solidify and make robust the fight for our peoples, so that in what's left of the 21st century, we can take up again this noble battle So that's a response to all of our questions and doubts that sometimes encroach upon us. And sometimes we can feel quite down when we think of the perspectives on the horizon for humanity here on in. But we do sincerely believe that the answer is to be found in international law and in multilateralism. And our fight, without a shadow of a doubt, is the fight of millions of people against the most powerful in the world, against the old colonial powers of ever and the hegemonous powers. And our fight is rebellion and the fight of the peoples, the fight of this union that refuses to bow to be brought to its knees under any hegemony. Brothers and sisters, a little more than 4 years ago, the UN system, within this UN system, we promoted and we managed to get the Agenda 2030 approved for sustainable development. And this was something really humane. We wanted it to be absolutely human and absolutely inclusive. We wanted it to have a perspective that was transformative and of real change so that no one would be left behind. This is a model of development contained within this 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda that faces up to poverty, that confronts it in all of its different forms and dimensions, taking into account the fact that the eradication of poverty is still one of those goals that we have to reach in the Sustainable Development Agenda. We're still not there. And so we have to continue to bring our contribution to the development of the people so that they can continue to enjoy social development and political progress. But we need to undertake profound changes in the international economic structure so as to be able to get to a fair balance of wealth, of the wealth that we all produce for the rest of the world. And so what we're talking about here is finding, through the debate in our different nations, finding different alternatives that bring an end to the economic suffering of the great majority and the violation of human rights of whole peoples. And we can see the disastrous consequences, ladies and gentlemen. Dear brothers and sisters, we see the devastating consequences of the economic model and schemes and different formulas of policies imposed by the IMF on our countries of the global south. We see that. And in every single one of our regions, we see it, and even beyond those borders. And they're policies that are not just imposed by the great centres of power, but they also bring on the collapse, structural, economical, institutional and social of those countries, and the erosion of entire societies against justice through economic schemes that take away independence, whether this be economic, judicial or social. And therefore, from this tribune, we make a call to everyone to work on these funds that have to do with the economic model proposed by capitalist countries through the IMF that are actually causing all of this suffering, all of this ripping apart of the social tissues, the economic and moral social tissues of the global south. And our movement, our NAM movement, has to stand up against it. And in the years to come, we have to propose an alternative that's human and inclusive and that brings an end to the misery of this IMF or World Bank induced misery on our respective countries. Dear countrymen and women of the world, dear brothers and sisters, so as to finalise my speech, I would like to underline the importance of favourising alternatives from the basis of a culture of peace, political understanding and dialogue between nations on the basis of mutual respect and keeping firm to the UN Charter and to the standards of international law. And we reaffirm our robust commitment on the part of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela with the Bandung Principles and the objectives of this movement with our Bolivarian movement of peace, and we consider that under the chairmanship of Azerbaijan, the Republic of Azerbaijan, that we wish every success and our full and unwavering support at the head of this NAM. We know it's going to keep its relevance, and it's going to bring to bear with the relevance that it should bring to bear, and basically be able to show its weight in this 21st century and in this international community and world, and we will create a better destiny for us all. Ladies and gentlemen, in the 14th summit of the NAM in Havana, Cuba, in September of 2006, our eternal commander, revolutionary, Hugo Chavez, made a presentation or gave a presentation similar to this. And what brings us together is the following quote, and I'm now going to quote Comandante. We are the Global South, and we exist and we want to exist on equal terms with the North, the Global North. We are not subordinaries of the North, and we have the respect that we want to be given. And only when the Global South is on a par with the Global North will this world be possible. If not, this world is impossible. How much truth is contained in that one phrase, how much vision, how much clarity. It really is quite revolutionary and luminary quote that's basically summing up the story, which is the story of our peoples and their fight for independence and sovereignty. Our great freedom fighter, our great liberator, Simon Bolivar, 200 years ago, shouted out the following thing: the unity of our countries is not just making of men, but the inseparable playing out of destiny. And we are and we will be unbeatable. And it will be impossible to bring us down. So how much life, how much visionary knowledge also in this quote from Simon Bolivar, our revolutionary leader. So let's all just come together, be united, and we will be, as Simon Bolivar says, unbeatable. No one will be able to bring us down. And all of that clamour and the voices from our peoples that are calling out for us to free them from these imperialistic chains, we are leaving this mission in the respectful hands of the President of Azerbaijan. He now takes up the presidency. Ilham Aliyev takes up the next triennial, 2019-2022. Brothers and sisters, let's stay united with one coherence and one strong voice. This historical movement of peoples and movement, let's continue to be light and hope for humanity. Thank you so much, and congratulations and every wish of success and good luck for your next triennial, President of Azerbaijan. Thank you.
Siguiendo la agenda.
So let's press on with the agenda. I suggest that we move on. Let's officially proceed to the election of the president of the 18th summit of heads of state and government of the NAM. Therefore, in this regard, I can see no objections, so I propose the distinguished delegations to elect by acclamation His Excellency Mr. Ilham Aliyev, President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, as the chairman of this 18th summit, a historic summit here in the city of Baku of the non-aligned movement for the triennial 2019-2022. So I see no objections, so I declare him the chairman of this movement, Mr. Aliyev, and I invite President Aliyev to assume his chairmanship. Thank you very much for your support. Thank you.
Hörmətli dövlət və
Dear heads of state and government, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, I cordially salute all the participants of the 18th Summit of the Non-Aligned Movement. Welcome. I express my gratitude to the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela for the chairmanship in the Non-Aligned Movement during 2016-2019. The non-aligned movement serves the cause of promoting universal values and demonstrates the commitment to sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of all countries. Having united 120 countries, the movement is the second largest political institution after the United Nations General Assembly, where the nations of the world are represented. Azerbaijan was accepted to the non-aligned movement in 2011. During the short period of time as a member of the movement, our country has gained relevance as a resolute advocate of norms and principles of international law. During the 17th Summit of the Heads of State and Government, held in 2016, the unanimous decision was made to hold the next summit in the city of Baku and to entrust Azerbaijan with chairmanship in the organization for the years 2019-2022. It is an embodiment of respect, transit, and confidence in our country. I view this as a support of the non-aligned movement that brings together most of the countries of the world to our policy, and once again express my gratitude to you for that decision. During its chairmanship in the non-aligned movement, Azerbaijan will build its priorities and performance based on historic Bandung Principles, the very principles that embody respect to sovereignty and territorial integrity of all the countries, non-interference into internal affairs, upholding of mutual interests, and promotion of cooperation concur with the core principles of Azerbaijan's foreign policy. We must increase our efforts to ensure universal implementation of the norms and principles of international law. In this sense, there is a great need for reforms in the performance of the United Nations. Modifying of borders by force, violation of territorial integrity of countries through the use of force, and interference into internal affairs is unacceptable. During the time of its chairmanship in the non-aligned movement, Azerbaijan will make efforts to establish and foster dialogue with other institutions and thus expand the geography of cooperation. Given that the majority of the countries members to the movement are developing countries, we must develop cooperation in the economic sphere within the organization. In this sense, Azerbaijan's accession to the Group of 77 last month creates an opportunity for increasing our efforts further on the global scale in the socio-economic sphere. The joint advocacy of the interests of the member states within the UN is of particular importance. Special attention should be riveted to the threats encountered by the least developed, landlocked, and small island nations. Since 2005, Azerbaijan has rendered humanitarian and technical assistance to over 90 countries. The Agency for International Development of the Republic of Azerbaijan has implemented grant programs and projects in the spheres of poverty eradication, science, culture, healthcare, development of IT, and efficient use of water resources and other areas in different countries of the world. Since 2018, Azerbaijan has offered scholarships for citizens of the non-aligned movement member states in the higher learning institutions of our country, and those are full scholarships. Today, 37 youths from 31 member states are benefiting from that program. Youth policy in Azerbaijan is identified as a priority. Azerbaijani youth are brought up in the spirit of national sentiment, traditional values, bond with homeland and patriotism. This is why we have initiated the holding of the first ever Youth Summit of the Non-Aligned Movement. In the run-up to our summit today, youth from 40 countries participated in the Youth Summit. Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, Azerbaijan's independence is only 28 years old. 1 week ago, on October the 18th, we have celebrated the anniversary of the restoration of our independence. For more than 25 years, the historic land of Azerbaijan, the Nagorno-Karabakh, and 7 adjacent districts, roughly 20% of the country's internationally recognized territory, has remained under Armenia's occupation. Armenia has conducted a policy of ethnic cleansing against the Azerbaijanis, and as a result, over 1 million Azerbaijanis have become refugees or internally displaced persons. Back then, Azerbaijan's population was 8 million, and it is with deep regret that I have to say that at the time our country topped the list of the countries with the highest number of refugees and internally displaced people per capita in the world. Armenia perpetrated the Khojaly genocide against the Azerbaijanis, as a result of which 613 innocent people, including 106 women and 63 children, were murdered just because they were Azerbaijanis. Over 1,000 people went missing. Khojaly genocide was recognized internationally by more than 10 countries. In 1993, the UN Security Council adopted 4 resolutions that demand complete and unconditional withdrawal of the Armenian forces from the Azerbaijani territory. Unfortunately, those resolutions were never implemented. Sometimes it is a matter of several days that the UN Security Council resolutions are implemented, and then there are other instances, such as with the conflict that Azerbaijan faces today, when such resolutions remain on paper for 26 years. The policy of double standards must stop. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation, Cooperation Council of Turkic-speaking states, the European Parliament, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, OSCE, and other prominent organizations have adopted resolutions and decisions demanding the restoration of Azerbaijan's territorial integrity. Seizing this opportunity, I wish to thank the member states for support expressed in the documents adopted by the non-aligned movement so far to the resolution of the conflict, in line with the UN Security Council resolutions and based on Azerbaijan's territorial integrity. Armenia destroyed all of our historical monuments, mosques, and cemeteries across Azerbaijan's occupied territories and plundered all the museums and tangible cultural riches. Armenia deliberately attempts to erase Azerbaijan's footprint in the occupied territories by replacing all the original toponyms with Armenian ones. In contravention with the international humanitarian law, Armenia also implements a policy of illegal resettlement and conducts illicit economic activity in the occupied areas. As a result of military provocation by Armenia in April 2016, 6 Azerbaijani civilians, including 1 child, were killed, 26 more were wounded. Hundreds of houses were destroyed. Karabakh is Azerbaijan's ancestral land. Armenia, the conflict can only be settled based on the territorial integrity of the Republic of Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is conducting an independent foreign policy. This policy stems from national interests and justice and has helped us gain many friends worldwide. A vivid example of that was Azerbaijan's election as the UN Security Council's non-permanent member with the support of 155 nations in 2011. During our membership in the Security Council, Azerbaijan made great contributions to strengthening of international peace and security and upholding justice, and became an active player in the international political processes. Azerbaijan is also contributing to international peacekeeping operations under the UN Security Council mandate. Our country regularly hosts Russia-NATO and Russia-US meetings held between top-level military officials. There are nearly 200 countries around the world. Azerbaijan's selection out of so many countries as a venue for such meetings is a sign of respect to an independent foreign policy that we conduct. Dear guests, early years of Azerbaijan's independence were extremely tumultuous. During the years of the rule of traitorous, cowardly, and incompetent Azerbaijani Popular Front, our country went through great disasters and misery. The civil war was unleashed in Azerbaijan. It was only 1993, with the return of President Heydar Aliyev to power upon the demands of the people of Azerbaijan, that Azerbaijan was saved from more calamities. Azerbaijan entered the path of democratic and sustainable development, and peace and stability came to our land. Azerbaijan is committed to such values as democracy, human rights, and personal freedoms. They are deeply historically ingrained. We're proud that over a century ago, in the East, in the Muslim world, the first ever democratic republic was established in Azerbaijan, and women were granted the right to vote, something we had done ahead of most Western nations. Democratic development is Azerbaijan's conscious choice. All the fundamental human rights and freedoms, the rule of law, and freedom of the press are ensured in Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan's economy has been growing at a fast pace, and the country's GDP has more than tripled in the past 15 years. More than $270 billion were invested in Azerbaijan, half of them being foreign investments. Azerbaijan's foreign debt accounts for 17% of our GDP, and based on that indicator, we're ranking 9th in the world. Poverty in Azerbaijan stands at 5%. This year alone, we have doubled the minimum wage and social benefits, and minimum pensions were increased by 70%. Our program of targeted social assistance covers 68,000 families or 280,000 people, which means that every such family receives a monthly social allowance of an equivalent of $140. In the last 15 years, we have either built or completely renovated over 3,200 schools and 640 hospitals. The literacy rate in Azerbaijan is nearly 100%. Over 300,000 internally displaced persons were provided with free houses and apartments. The internally displaced families receive a monthly allowance of an equivalent of $180. Azerbaijan's accomplishments are recognized worldwide. According to the World Bank's Doing Business report for 2020, Azerbaijan is among the top 20 reformer countries, while according to the Davos World Economic Forum report, Azerbaijan ranks number 10 for the government's long-term strategy and 5th in terms of leadership inclination towards reform in the world. Azerbaijan is a space nation. Today, we have 3 satellites, 2 of them being telecommunication ones, and 3rd being an Earth observation satellite. 80% of our population are internet users. Azerbaijan ensures its energy security. Once again, I refer you to the Davos World Economic Forum report, where in terms of access to electricity index, Azerbaijan ranks second in the world. Azerbaijan is also a supplier of energy to several other countries. Being a landlocked country, Azerbaijan serves as a bridge between Asian and European continents, and as such has initiated and participated in several regional transportation projects. Azerbaijan is an active participant of East-West and South-North transportation corridors and is currently working on other key projects such as Southwest and Northwest projects. Thus, as a reliable transit country, Azerbaijan makes a valuable contribution to multilateral international cooperation. Climate change is a global threat. Azerbaijan supports international efforts to tackle the consequences of climate change. Azerbaijan has ratified the Paris Treaty and identified a 35% reduction of greenhouse emissions as a target for 2030, with 1990 being the base year. Only environmentally safe natural gas and hydropower plants are used for electricity generation in Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan enjoys the rich traditions of tolerance and multiculturalism. Multiculturalism is a way of life for Azerbaijani people. The Baku process that we started 11 years ago with the participation of the country's members to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and the Council of Europe is also supported by the United Nations. The UN Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, said the Baku process has been at the forefront of advocating for dialogue among cultures since 2008. Conceived as a logical continuation of the Baku process, the World Forum on Intercultural Dialogue, held biannually in our country, is recognized in the UN General Assembly resolutions as a major platform for promoting intercultural dialogue. Dear guests, I am confident that discussions to be held within this summit will contribute to the implementation of goals on the non-aligned movement's agenda. During our chairmanship, Azerbaijan will put forth consistent efforts to realize its priorities jointly with the member states. I wish success to the work of the summit and once again welcome every one of you. Thank you for your attention.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, the provisional agenda for today is before you. Is there any objections to agenda? If not, the agenda is adopted. Next agenda item is the election of the members of the Bureau. The list of candidates is in front of you. The list of special guest countries and organizations invited to the summit also is in front of you. If there is no objection, the list is considered to be adopted. Now I will give the floor to Mr. Tijani Mohammed Bande, President of the 74th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Please.
Heads of state and government, distinguished ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I'm here today to attend the 18th Non-Aligned Movement Summit. I thank His Excellency President Ilham Aliyev for superbly hosting it. I congratulate Azerbaijan on taking over the chairmanship of the movement from the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and thank His Excellency President Nicolas Maduro Moras for his leadership in the past 3 years. The level of participation in this summit is evidence of the strong reverence member states continue to accord the movement. I'm confident that you will continue to sustain the momentum. build on the core values of NAM, and leverage the fact that it has 120 member states to ensure political consultations and cooperation that promote and strengthen international peace and security, as well as the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals. Both the United Nations and NAM aim to achieve international peace and security. The United Nations emerged in 1945 from a destructive war to save future generations from the scourge of war. The non-aligned movement was formed in 1961 at the height of the Cold War to achieve a world of peace and justice with respect and solidarity at the heart of cooperation and development. The ideals emphasized by the United Nations to guarantee peace are the same that NAM stands for. This include respect for fundamental human rights, sovereignty and territorial integrity of all nations, non-intervention in the internal affairs of countries, equality of all races and nations, as well as the peaceful resolution of international conflicts. The aforementioned are part of the Bandung Principles and continue to be relevant today, as they are critical for the attainment of international peace and security, as well as the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals. Excellencies, it is impossible to talk of the achievements of the United Nations without mentioning the contribution of NAM, particularly the many ways the movement reinforces the principles of the Charter of the United Nations through opposition to colonialism, racism, hegemony, aggression, as well as foreign intervention and/or occupation. The values the movement brings to bear on the world through the cooperation of its member states with the United Nations cannot be taken for granted. We must work to uphold the Bandung Principles in addressing violent conflicts, terrorism, renewed nuclear and other armament threats, climate change, and its repercussions. We must deepen multilateral cooperation to succeed in this important endeavor. We need to bear in mind that the end of the Cold War has not diminished the role of the movement in the international system, and its members cannot rest on their oars. Today, the major task is to ensure that the aforementioned challenges are tackled with the same fervor of NAM's earlier years. It is important to also remember that the reality of our world is that developing countries continue to suffer from the protracted crisis from the era predating the non-aligned movement. They also suffer the most from the ravages of conflicts, wars, and disregard for international law fueled by geopolitics. For these reasons, it is important that NAM focus on issues of respect for human rights and justice, sustainable development, and decolonization, as they align very well with the Bandung Principles, and as well as the Charter of the United Nations. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, NAM must continue to be a voice of reason and moderation, and must never fail to work within the framework of the United Nations Charter for peace, stability, human progress, and justice, even when it seems difficult. It must thus focus on the promotion of international peace and security, particularly the many crises around the world, which also involve its members. Excellencies, we must find urgent solutions to many of the problems affecting not only NAM countries, but all member states. The movement needs to work within the United Nations to strengthen the peace and security architecture, particularly making a priority of prevention. This also entails the drivers of conflict, such as poverty, lack of access to education, inequality, and unemployment, must be tackled head-on. We must focus particularly on ensuring that youth, women, and girls can effectively participate in societal affairs. We also have to make adequate provision for people with disabilities to function and to contribute their quota to society. Among other things, government should facilitate girl-child education. Excellencies, it is important to consistently advocate for the creation of a mutually beneficial economic space through the creation, development, and diffusion of new innovations and technologies. This could be done within the framework of South-South cooperation. If we will make appreciable progress, we must ensure the equal participation of women in the economic sector. In communities that are in conflict or recovering from conflict, it's also important to include women in the reconciliation and peace-building efforts. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the role your nations play within the United Nations is important, and I look forward to a cooperation within the next year as I work to achieve my priorities of poverty eradication, zero hunger, quality education, climate action, and inclusion. These issues affect us all, even if in varying degrees. We must also continue to work together on the reform of the United Nations system, the General Assembly, ECOSOC, Secretariat, and the Security Council. For the United Nations to be fit for purpose, we must ensure that we continue to cooperate to ensure a reform that meets the realities of the 21st century. The organization is currently in the process of strengthening and revitalizing the work of the General Assembly, the main deliberative and normative body responsible for setting the direction of the United Nations, with the goal of making it a true parliament of nations. We'll continue to focus on improving the way we do business. 3 reform processes related to the reform of the peace architecture, management reform, as well as the repositioning of the United Nations development system have already been delivered. The Assembly will also engage in the next few weeks on the important process of review of the Economic and Social Council, as well as the high-level political forum for sustainable development. The intergovernmental negotiation on Security Council reform will also be convened, and we are in the process of selecting co-facilitators. The current composition of the Council does not reflect the reality of the 21st century, and we must ensure that the intergovernmental process runs smoothly this year and achieves progress. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the 75th commemoration of the creation of the United Nations will be held next year, and I urge that we utilize the opportunity to rededicate to the principles of the United Nations as enumerated in its charter. Without doubt, the continued upholding of the NAM principles will mean that NAM members show solidarity, friendly resolution of differences, and a determination to never engage in bitter rivalries, but instead prioritize cooperation, mutual respect. Member states of the movement must continue to rally themselves to ensure that they are better able to deal with challenges that confront all of us. It is my charge, respectfully, that as the movement begins another phase of its existence under the leadership of Azerbaijan, will continue to witness much progress. I wish you all fruitful discussions, Excellencies. I thank you.
Thank you. And now I invite Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, United Nations Under Secretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, to deliver her statement. Please.
Your Excellency, Mr. Ilham Aliyev, President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, Chair of the Non-Aligned Movement. Your Excellency, Mr. Nicolas Maduro, President of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, outgoing Chair of the Non-Aligned Movement. Excellencies, distinguished guests, I am pleased to convey the following message from His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations. I'm honored to greet this of the heads of state and government of the Non-Aligned Movement. I congratulate Azerbaijan on assuming the chairmanship of NAM and look forward to working together. The Non-Aligned Movement has made immense contributions to the work of the United Nations. NAM members represent 2/3 of the UN membership and contribute 80% of UN peacekeepers. Through the years, the concerns and views of non-aligned movement countries have shaped our agenda from peace and security to sustainable development and human rights. You gather at a time of unease and uncertainty around the world. A great many people are losing faith in a process of globalization that is leaving them behind. We see a growing deficit of trust in governments, political establishments, government and the media, and the rising appeal of nationalist and populist voices. At the same time, we are witnessing the multiplication of conflicts that are increasingly interlinked and which are also intertwined with the newer threats of global terrorism and international criminality. Over the decades, international cooperation has saved lives, advanced human rights, prevented conflicts, and expanded economic and social progress. Yet across the world today, we are seeing greater skepticism about multilateralism and increasing calls for isolationism and closed borders. The norms that have defined international cooperation for the last 75 years are under pressure. We are falling short in the face of unresolved conflicts, runaway climate change, widening inequalities, and other threats. We face a paradox. Global challenges are more connected, but our responses are growing more fragmented. This is very dangerous at a time when collective action is essential. But it is not enough to proclaim the virtue of multilateralism. We must prove the value of international cooperation by addressing the real problems people face and doing so in a way that they understand and in which they can participate. We need a networked multilateralism with close cooperation among international and regional organizations and important groups such as the NAM. We also need to work towards an inclusive multilateralism with strong partnerships with parliaments, the business community, civil society, academics, and others. I applaud your long-standing focus on the challenge of disarmament and nonproliferation, and I've put forward a new disarmament agenda to advance global peace. The United Nations will continue working with member states to make progress, including in the context of the 2020 Review Conference of the Treaty on the Nonproliferation of Nuclear Weapons, the cornerstone of the disarmament and nonproliferation regime. Excellencies, let us never forget that development is critical for stable and prosperous societies. It is also a fundamental instrument for conflict prevention. We have a vital tool for addressing some of the roots of instability. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, our shared blueprint for a fair globalization. Yet 4 years since the agenda's adoption, we are far from where we need to be in reducing inequality, in addressing the climate crisis, in tackling global hunger, in achieving gender equality, and expanding opportunity for young people. We must step up our efforts with greater ambition and financing. We also know how climate change is an accelerator of insecurity. As we have seen in the Sahel region and elsewhere, the competition for resources is often an additional factor of instability. It is no coincidence that the countries most vulnerable to climate change are often those most vulnerable to conflict and fragility. If our world is to avoid the climate cliff, we must build on the achievements of last month's Climate Action Summit, heed the call of science, and cut greenhouse emissions by 45% by 2030, reach carbon neutrality by 2050, and limit temperature rise to 1.5 degrees by the end of the century. Finally, in all we do, the initiative, energy, and ideas of young people will be critical. I commend your efforts to expand opportunities for youth and engage them as partners in preventing conflict, sustaining peace, and assuring justice. As the movement towards a multipolar world continues, strong multilateral institutions are ever more critical. Let us pledge to keep working to reap the benefits of multilateralism, particularly as a central vehicle to maintain international peace and security, foster friendly relations among states, and ensure human dignity for all. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I will give the floor to the chairperson of the group of 77, Mr. Riyad Mansour. Please.
Excellency, Mr. Ilham Aliyev, President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, the Chairman of the Non-Aligned Movement, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the Group of 77 and China. At the outset, I would like to express my deep appreciation to Venezuela as outgoing chair of the non-aligned movement and congratulate Azerbaijan, which just recently joined the Group of 77 and China family, on assuming the chairmanship of the movement. The Group of 77 and China is confident that Azerbaijan will ably guide the NAM in making positive contributions to global peace and stability. Mr. Chair, as we approach the 65th anniversary of the Bandung Principles and the 60th anniversary of the establishment of the movement, we stress that the vision of Bandung for lasting peace and security is more relevant than ever. This summit's theme is very timely at this critical juncture for international law, multilateralism, and the peaceful settlement of disputes. We remain undeterred by the current challenges and shall remain faithful to the principles that underpinned the creation of the movement and the group. Both NAM and the G77 and China have been and continue to be the champions of a rules-based multilateral order that upholds the purposes and principles enshrined in the UN Charter, not only because we represent the majority, or rather 2/3 of the world population and of all states, but also because we defend a vision of the world that is deeply rooted in international law, mutual respect, and mutually beneficial and just cooperation for the benefit of all countries and all peoples. The group reaffirms in this regard, in accordance with the 2030 Agenda, international law, and the Charter of the United Nations, the need to uphold the right to self-determination of peoples living under colonial and foreign occupation and to respect the territorial integrity and political independence of states. The group reiterates its firm rejection to the imposition of laws and regulations with extraterritorial impact and all other forms of coercive economic measures, including unilateral sanctions against developing countries, and reiterate the urgent need to eliminate them immediately. The Group of 77 and China rose at the SDG Summit in defense of the integrity and integrality of the 2030 Agenda, strongly advocating the need to provide the necessary resolve and means to ensure its implementation and opposing any attempt to undermine or reinterpret the agenda. It did so in the most challenging time since the adoption of the agenda. We succeeded in maintaining the emphasis on the eradication of poverty as the greatest global challenge and as an indispensable requirement for sustainable development. We preserved the expression of the international consensus on climate change. We stressed the importance of an honest assessment of the challenges faced in the implementation of the SDGs, notably those faced by developing countries, and the need to address them, including through concrete actions that were adopted as part of the political declaration. We were successful in reflecting a commitment to finding peaceful and just solutions to disputes and to respect international law and the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations, including the right to self-determination of peoples and the need to respect the territorial integrity and political independence of states. We reflected a commitment to enhance financial and non-financial means of implementation, including the promotion of a universal, rules-based, open, transparent, non-discriminatory, and equitable multilateral trading system. We have a decade to implement the agenda, and all countries must deliver on their commitments, in particular, developed countries, in line with the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. We call on ODA providers uphold their commitments. We stress the need to facilitate the necessary means of implementation, in particular in the areas of finance, technology, and capacity building, as well as international trade through a universal, rules-based, open, transparent, predictable, inclusive, non-discriminatory, and equitable multilateral trading system under the WTO. We also emphasize the potential of science, technology, and innovation for achieving sustainable development and poverty eradication. We reiterate our commitment to South-South cooperation as a collective endeavor of developing countries and as a complement to, rather than a substitute for, North-South cooperation. The Buenos Aires outcome document has brought the necessary momentum and provided us with a roadmap for South-South and triangular cooperation. Our group continued to translate into action the pledge, leave no one behind, asserting the rights of developing countries while helping them assume their responsibilities, in particular, countries in special situations and those facing specific challenges. While continuing to reject politically motivated decisions to withhold contributions to the UN, and while insisting that such decisions are at the origin of the current financial crisis faced by the UN, the group took a leading role in efforts to address the financial situation of the organization and in providing a response, notably as regards its peacekeeping budget. The G77 and China also took a strong stance in defense of troop and police contributing countries, a majority of which are members of our group, including in trying to ensure they are paid the money they are owed and in rejecting through a vote in the Fifth Committee attempts at advancing notions that are detrimental to them. While NAM took the lead in the revitalization of the work of the General Assembly, the G77 and China was in charge of the alignment of the agenda of the General Assembly with the 2030 agenda, and both continued defending the interests of the Global South, including by advocating equitable geographical representation. The group tabled a few days ago a resolution to enlarge the ACABQ membership to ensure better representation of developing countries from all three regional components of the group in this important body. Mr. Chairman, in closing, the group has consistently pleaded, as reflected in the agenda, that there can be no peace without sustainable development and no sustainable development without peace. The work of the G77 and China and NAM, which spans the entire UN agenda, is therefore complementary in advancing the positions of developing countries on both fronts for a more just, equitable, peaceful, and prosperous world. May the unity and solidarity of the Global South pave the way to the realization of this noble objective. And I thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And now I will give the floor to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Azerbaijan, Mr. Ilmar Mamediyarov, in his capacity as chair of the preparatory ministerial meeting of the 18th summit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. The preparatory ministerial meeting for the 80th Summit of Heads of State and Government of the Non-Aligned Movement was held in Baku, the Republic of Azerbaijan, on October 23rd and 24th of 2019. The meeting was attended by the delegation of 72 member states and 20 observer states and organizations. On the 23rd October 2019, in his capacity as the chair of the movement of non-aligned countries, His Excellency Mr. Jorge Arias Montserrat, Minister of Popular Power for Foreign Affairs of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, opened the meeting. Subsequently, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela proposed the elections of His Excellency Mr. Ilmar Mamediyarov, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Azerbaijan, as the chair of the preparatory ministerial meeting for the 18th NAM Summit. Following the election of chair, preparatory ministerial meeting proceeded to adopt the agenda of the meeting. As per agenda, the meeting participants heard a report of the chair of the preparatory senior official meeting outlining the results of deliberations on draft outcome documents of the summit. Preparatory ministerial meeting continued its work with interactive debate on the theme of the 18th summit of the non-aligned movement, called Upholding the Bandung Principles to ensure concerted and adequate response to the challenges of contemporary world. During the interactive debate, the preparatory ministerial meeting heard the statements of the head of 54 delegations. The meeting endorsed the draft final document, draft Baku Declaration, Declaration Palestine, and the draft motion of thanks to and solidarity with the people and government of the Republic of Azerbaijan, recommending them for consideration and adoption by the 18th Summit of Heads of State and Government of the Non-Aligned Movement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'd like to inform the participants that at the initiative of Azerbaijan, for the first time ever, the Youth Summit of the Non-Alignment Movement was held in Baku. We thank participants of the Youth Summit for the recommendations addressed to the summit, and you may find the recommendations before you. And now I'd like to conclude the opening session of the 18th Summit of Heads of States and Governments of the Non-Alignment Movement. And we'll now have a break for lunch. The working lunch is served at the convention center. And the general debate will start at 2:30. Thank you.
Congratulations.
This I like.
There's a watch here.
Yeah. Oh, it's a watch.
Yeah.
President will be the first to speak after the opening, and my brother will be second to speak after the...
Thank you.
Not right. Надо это не перепутать.